Our next presenters are Dennis Lambert and Dr. Moby Solangi. Dennis is currently serving as a benefit cost analyst at IEM, reviewing flood mitigation applications for the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. He is a civil and environmental engineer with over 35 years of experience in construction and engineering. He has managed over 90 conventional infrastructure projects. His expertise includes marine environments and all phases of conventional infrastructure in Louisiana, including more than 14 NEPA projects with 2 EISs and 1 third-party EIS. Dr. Moby Solangi is the president and executive director of the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies. He founded the organization in 1984 to promote marine research, conservation, and education. He has conducted pioneering research on dolphins and sea turtles, both in the wild and under human care. His research experience includes work in the effect of crude oil on fishes, ecology, marine education, marine mammal behavior, husbandry, and veterinary care. He also served as the president of Marine Life Oceanarium in Gulfport for 25 years until Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Dennis and Moby, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is Dennis Lambert, and today's presentation is on the proposed sediment diversions that are in the Louisiana Coastal Master Plan, and in particular, 2 projects that are being brought forward under the Construction Management at Risk delivery model, and their names are Mid-Barataria and Mid-Barataria Diversions. And so today, this is our agenda, and I'm going to go through a little bit about our background, what diversions are and their impacts, the history of them, the recent developments, their current design status, their permitting status and NEPA processing, a waiver they got from the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the current schedule for their NEPA documents to be produced, a few conservation tenets, and some suggestions on how to protect dolphins in the Mississippi Sound. As Jennifer noted, I work for IEM. I'm a benefit cost analyst. I'm working on flood mitigation projects in Louisiana for what we call GOSEP, which is the emergency arm. And Dr. Moby is the founder, executive director, and president of the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies. And he got a PhD, as Jennifer mentioned, from USM in 1980. And our combined relevant experience include all these diversions. I was part of the independent technical review team for the 4 lower river diversions. But my diversion experience goes back about 20 years. I was working on not a dissertation, but the thesis in graduate school for the Maurepas diversion that did change, but at the time it was part of the 2050 coast plan that the state of Louisiana was putting forth back in the 90s. And then I worked on and off on different projects since. And then, of course, Dr. Moby Solangi has been involved in the evaluation of the impacts from the Bonacary spillway and was a key member of the team for Mississippi for the BP spill. And I think that we're just going to try to distill this down in simple terms for you all in Mississippi so that you understand, you can trust us, that we are going to talk in layman terms mostly, and that these are complex projects and they're being driven by complex processes. And I think it's important to understand them, like I said, in simple terms. We're going to first start with this video, and it's on a forum that was held both on the spillway and the diversions, and it was held last year. It was put on by the local newspaper, Sun Herald.
What is happening is something that is a game changer, that we have never seen like this happen in our lifetime. Your life and your children's life and your grandchildren's life is about to change.
In the wintertime, when the water's cooler, you get it's the wet time of year when you get a lot of rain anyway.
That was my point. Why they couldn't get ahead of the game, you know, when they saw this big, they can predict this you know, big rivers rising, you know. In Louisiana, I'm not sure about the statistics in Mississippi, but we had a little over 60% reduction in the shrimp landings during brown shrimp season. We had a 90 to 100% mortality rates on our oysters. We had a 35, I think it's 35% reduction in our landings in blue crab. So that's pretty significant.
This freshwater is done a toll on all of our fisheries, and we're still monitoring it. We're still looking at our commercial landings and doing our assessment, but we won't really know the effects of a lot of this until a couple of years down the road.
But Mid-Barataria Diversion is proposed to have a capacity of 75,000 cubic feet a second, which is about half of what the spillway averaged. But this year, it could have been operated for 201 days, when the spillway was operated for 123. So it's less water, but for a longer period of time.
It's very much a concern that, you know, who will stand up for us and who is going to be speaking up, and will the law have to be changed to change the way these decisions are made? Because, as I say, the whole plan, the Jodwin plan, the whole thing was kind of flawed from the beginning. And so something needs to be done. But it's even more disturbing when you look at this Mid-Barataria diversion and think about how little, no thought has been given to Mississippi with this diversion, none. And I ask, or is anyone from Mississippi at these Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority meetings? No, they haven't been there. Maybe they're now, but you know, folks in this room and folks on the coast are really going to have to be responsible for getting their elected and community leaders to stand up for Mississippi in this, because nobody's listening. And I know past studies of the environmental impacts of the Bonnie Carey really have focused on Louisiana waters. And after people started speaking up with these openings this year, they're going to include Mississippi in the current study of what the impact is.
So as you can see in that video that which had subtitles about how serious these projects are to divert more river water. So, but with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Moby Solangi.
Well, I think, yes, thank you, Dennis. This is an extremely important issue. And if you look at it, the basic problem we have is the Mississippi River watershed is the largest in North America. It drains the river waters from many rivers from 31 states and 2 provinces in Canada. And along with that, along with the sediment, we get, it's also a very highly polluted river. It brings in industrial, agricultural, sewage, and other wastes. And as it comes down, you can see the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Tennessee, the Red, all these rivers, they all merge into one as they come into Louisiana. And as they go into the Gulf, they create a dead zone. And this high nutrient concentration in these areas prevent oxygen to be available to the organisms, which eventually die. And that's why it's called the dead zone. And if you look at it, look at the geography of it, Mississippi, Louisiana are the main areas affected by the 31 states and the 2 provinces. And so this is a real big problem. Sometimes this a dead zone can be as big as 10,000 square miles, especially in the summertime. And as we go along, you'll understand what Louisiana and the federal government have had to do to overcome some of the issues that result from this discharge from the watershed. But keep in mind, in simplistic terms, the watershed is like a bowl. And the drain is the river that goes to Louisiana. And what has happened is with climate change or whatever reason, there's a lot of rain. And if the drain is clogged, it overflows and you have flooding. And when the drain is clogged and you don't open it up and you create these little holes on the side of the drain, you get these diversions. And so you have this non-indigenous water going into areas that suffer. And I think it's important for folks in Mississippi to understand that Mississippi Sound and any of its waters are not connected to the Mississippi River. So here's the Mississippi River. One of the stuff that we did in 2019 was the effect of the Bonnie Carey spillway. Now here's the Bonnie Carey spillway. It opens into this huge lake, which is called the Lake Pontchartrain Lake. And then there's this very small outlet, which is called the Wrigley's. So what you end up seeing is, first this has to fill up. This becomes like a freshwater lake. There are also other rivers that flow into the Lake Pontchartrain. So this is a constant impact. But when trillions and trillions of gallons come into the non-indigenous areas, there's an impact. But if you look at it, this particular map was done on April 15 to 21 when the Bonnie Carey had opened. The lighter color shows you that low salinity, and the red color shows you high salinity, and as it changes, you see a gradation. But look at this area. There are 5 different diversions, and I'm sure that Dennis is going to talk about them. All of this is fresh water. And if you're looking at the geography, folks in Mississippi need to realize that this is Mississippi Sound, this is Britain Sound, and this is Chandelier Sound. All of these are connected, and this is one ecosystem. Please don't get fooled by these artificial lines that this is Mississippi and this is Louisiana. All of these areas are interdependent, they're interconnected. They are an essential fish habitat, in which we will discuss what that means. Fish that are spawning here spend adult life here and vice versa. So when you cut off the legs and hands of part of the ecosystem, the rest of it is going to suffer. And what has happened, you want to go to the next slide? What we saw was, due to the impact of trillions and trillions of gallons of river water, and I hate to use the word freshwater, people think it is a spring flowing in. This has so much pollutants in it, and insecticides, pesticides, hydrocarbons, all sorts of fertilizers. These animals are resident animals. This is their home. And before they realize that there's an aquatic hurricane, these animals get sick and they're dead. Now, this is an animal that was alive. When we went to rescue it, you can see all these different sores on the body. These sores then become the place where these bacteria, fungi, and other pathogens can enter these animals. Now, remember, these are top predators. They are basically the canary in the mine. They are the biological indicator of the environment. And so, but they also serve like a black box. They store the information in their bodies, like their blubber will accumulate the insecticides and pesticides. And so these animals, as we study, reveal what may be going on. For example, when you look at their teeth and you section them, just like a tree, there are little circular areas of their development, and you can tell at what stage in their life they were encountering some stressful events. So these black boxes become an important tool, so do the sea turtles. So we had some, next slide. What we've been doing is we've been monitoring the cause and effect relationships. There's of course a lot more than this chart, but if you look at from 1937, when the Bonnie Carey spillway was operational, every 5, 7, 8 years it would open up, and this shows you how many trillions of gallons of water was put through Lake Pontchartrain. Well, I wasn't monitoring them as strictly until the BP oil spill. Now, if you look in 2010, we had 91 dolphins and 309 sea turtles that we recovered. And this was when we had thousands of people in remote areas looking for animals, islands, marshes, cleanup crews all over the place. The most we found was 91 dolphins and 309 sea turtles. Most of the sea turtles were the most endangered sea turtle species, the Kemp's Ridley. We do have 5 species. We have the loggerhead, we have the Kemp's, the green, and so on and so forth. But the Kemp's Ridley, the Mississippi Sound has the highest population of Atlantic bottlenose dolphin in the United States. It is also a nursery for baby dolphins, and it's also a critical habitat for the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle, which only lays eggs in Mexico, and the adults spend their life in the United States. And so a turtle has 1 in 10,000 chance of becoming an adult. And these long-lived species, if their adult dies, it takes many, many years for them to reproduce and recover. So if you look at in 2011, without the BP folks looking for it, we had 147 dolphins and 266 sea turtles. Well, all of this was attributed, and if a moderator, Jennifer, will tell you, we had a fishery disaster. Oysters died, shrimp died, so the entire ecosystem suffered, but everything was put onto the BP oil spill. Well, we kept on monitoring, then it opens up again in 2016. Now we're seeing more frequent openings. We had 82 dolphins, a big jump, and 136 sea turtles. Then we come into 2018, and then again in 2019, we'd open up twice. And if you can see, the highest number in my entire history of 40 years on the Gulf Coast monitoring these species, we had the highest number of animals. And all of these animals, the federal government declared an unusual mortality event, and it was revealed that freshwater or the river water discharge was the main culprit. Next slide. You can see how after the opening of the Bonnie Carey spillway, you can see these red lines showing the tremendous increase in the bottlenose dolphin strandings per month. And here you can see the areas that were seen in abundance in terms of strandings. One of the reasons Louisiana was less is political. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife was under a lot of pressure, and I'm sure Dennis will be talking about the waiver. They didn't want a lot of these animals to be recovered. They decided not to respond, and NOAA had to come in to find out where the animals were dying and the cause of death. So there was a little bit of a lag in the scientific data, but still the numbers in Louisiana were second to Mississippi. We did have some hot spots in the panhandle of Florida and Alabama, but that was because 2019 was a wet year and the indigenous rivers probably had some impact, but here is where most of the impact was. Next slide. Here's the problem, and I'm going to let Dennis kind of chime in as we discuss this subject. This isn't, what we have done is that the Mississippi River, we have decided, the human beings have changed its course, and to maintain its course, we have levees, we have diversions to keep that river in this particular course. Its natural course was through the Chafalaya Basin, and of course, to, to protect it from flooding. It was distributed 70% going this way and 30% going through the Champlain Bay. But the irony is that those flood-prone areas have been now developed, and now the Corps of Engineers has to go and protect it. So as the river flows down, you've got the Morganza spillway. There are some regulations that says at what speed of water that one spillway would open, and the Morganza hasn't opened, as far as I can remember, for the past 25, 40 years. All the water comes down, and then the Morganza spillway was to protect Baton Rouge, and then of course the Bonnie Carey to protect New Orleans. And then of course you have all these other diversions that are putting out water into this, the Britain Sound, and indirectly through Lake Pontchartrain into the Mississippi Sound. So we have a very serious problem. It's just not just the salinity issue. We have nutrients, we have insecticides, pesticides, and so on and so forth. This is a very rich fishery area on both sides of the river. Dennis will talk about, there are many other factors that have caused the land loss, not just the way the Mississippi River water has been channeled. Here's what I think some of the bigger problems is. Like I mentioned to you, that the watershed is like a bowl, but all of it combines at the tip of Louisiana, becomes one river. And this river has lots of problems. The beginning of the river, when it comes into Louisiana, this causes aggradation, which basically means it's become shallow because of all the sediment that has accumulated. And then the mouth is shallow. So if you don't dredge it, if your drain is clogged, the water in the basin is going to overflow and cause flooding. The irony is that people think that the sediment coming with the river is going to fill up these areas that were used up for oil and gas. Problem is that 500 years ago or 300 years ago, the amount of sediment that's in the water has declined tremendously due to all the damming of the rivers upstream. There are different laws in each state. So it's a very big problem. It's not just the Louisiana problem. You've got these 31 states that dam this water, reduce the sediment, introduce these chemicals, whether it is through agriculture, through sewage systems, through drainage, or indiscriminate use of antibiotics. So these are various levels of aggradation or clogging. And if you don't open up this, so the geniuses have decided, instead of unclogging this, just drill holes in them to relieve the pressures. And so that is not going to do it. That is the biggest problem that we're facing. And it is an existential threat for the state of Mississippi, not only for its fisheries and it's for its economy. We lost tourism, we lost oysters, almost 100% loss of oysters, shrimp. The entire, like I mentioned, it's an aquatic hurricane. On land, you can see the devastation of the infrastructure, but the infrastructure of the ecosystem will take years and years. And if you keep on adding this water, polluted water, you're never going to recover. And so I think Mississippi folks need to really understand that the ecosystem is combined. Water that is going to be released here is going to eventually mix. There are, the hydrodynamic models will show you during the year how water flows back and forth. And even if not a single drop flowed back this way, this area is an essential fish habitat for the entire ecosystem, which consists of Mississippi Sound and Chandelier and Britain Sound. Next slide.
Thank you, Moby.
Okay.
And so I just want to follow up on Moby's comment. A lot of different interventions have been done on the river to manage it over the years, and the idea of diverting sediment out of it actually is not a new idea. It was discussed and debated 150 plus years ago in New Orleans. So the state of Louisiana participated in a federal study It was named the Mississippi River Hydrodynamic Delta Management Study. It is a study that was abandoned by Louisiana, withdrew as a sponsor, but it did help construct the initial basin-wide model. And the models that were used, they were coupled with other models, including some vegetation models, and they predicted that the river water inundation on the brackish marsh will create a significant biomass loss of up to 66% in 10 days. And of course, all federal studies of this nature have a peer review panel, and they reviewed the output, and they determined the mortality could be on the order of 50% within 2 months. So the natural process of converting this estuarine system into a lower salinity system will it will create a die-off. It will not only impact the vegetation in the brackish marsh, but the benthic communities and all of the species in the food web. So as mentioned, about 150 plus years ago, this was debated in New Orleans in regard to diverting river sediment out of the river into the marsh to elevate it. A man named Marie Joseph Raymond Thomasy has several writings that discuss this process, and he brought it to the attention of the residents in New Orleans from Italy, and it was also used in other parts of the world, where the outfall of these diversions would have containment levees to not only control the water, but to facilitate sedimentation. And the language is very similar to the purpose and need of the sediment diversion projects, and that is river water charged with alluvium to be directed upon the land and to create the sedimentation process that is equivalent to delta building. And there are several reports. I'd be happy to share those with anybody viewing this presentation. This is a page out of one of his manuscripts, and if you look at the lower right, there's a cross-section of the river, and he's got a series of levees running parallel to the main channel, and the concept is for the water to be released either through locks or pipes. This is in the 1850s. This concept was detailed, and the river water would then flow into these contained areas and then subsequently continue to flow out at a controlled rate. The concept of diverting the river reemerged in the early 1970s under the guidance and leadership of Woody Gagliano. He was the first one that drew a map in recent times where diversions were proposed. And then it got documented in the Quipper Comprehensive Master Plan in 1993, then into Coast 2050. And of course, we had the EIS for both Davis Pond and Carnarvon it actually started in the 80s, and all of that sort of built up into what is called LCA, the Louisiana Coastal Area, which was authorized right during the year of Katrina. And then after Katrina, the CPRA was formed, and it was mandated every 5 years that a coastal master plan be passed by the legislature. The next master plan will be in 2023. So these two projects are in the master plan, and they're being brought forward under an alternative delivery method called construction management at risk. And we will go over both of them, the first one being Mid-Barataria. They're both, they're very near each other, within 10 river miles, and one's on the left descending bank and the other's on the right descending bank. And they're both 75,000 CFS. So Mid-Barataria, it's a hardened diversion canal, if you can see that. And at the river, there's a Tanner Gate complex, and there's an outfall, and it's going to penetrate two levees. One is at the river, and one's a hurricane protection levee, and it will go across an existing railroad right-of-way and LA 23, so there'll be bridges built, and there'll be other facilities that will need to be modified. Here's a closer view of it. Here's the riverside where the Tanner Gates will sit in the hardened channel, and the different transportation facilities and levees that it'll penetrate. Here's a rendering of the intake at the river. It will go, the river water will go through this intake structure and through these Tanner Gates into the diversion channel. That's just a closer image of it. It shows the enormity of this complex and the scale. Mid-Breton, which is on the east side, on the state of Mississippi side, it's laid out. There are some similarities and some differences, but it also has to penetrate the river levee, and it does cross a highway there, which will be elevated, and then through a hurricane protection levee. And this is just a rendering of what it looks like. Again, there's some Tanner Gates there. So these are some Tanner Gates that you can see that are in place at the Old River Control Complex, which is at the confluence of the Red River, the Atchafalaya River, and the Mississippi River. And they're very large. This capacity of this structure is much larger than the diversions, but it does give you some idea of the scale of these heavy civil works projects. Again, here's a map, and these are all straight from the master plan. You have other diversions that are on the books. You have the Union diversion on the east side, the Maurepas diversion, of course, the existing Bonacary. You have the existing Carnarvon diversion. You have the proposed Mid-Breton diversion, and then you have the existing Mardi Gras Pass, which really is a breach at the old Bohemian salinity control structure. And it's just flowing continuously. It gets somewhere near 30,000 CFS. And if you keep going south on the east side, you have Fort St. Philip, which at times gets as much as 400,000 CFS through it. On the west side, you have planned the Alma North diversion. You have the existing Davis Pond diversion. You have the Alma diversion. And then you had the planned Mid-Barataria diversion. Again, if you look at the old river control complex, you can see that very similar structure. You have a very similar diversion channel that was used for a hydropower plant that is in place today. It's about 100,000 CFS capacity, roughly. And they have a hardened channel that diverts the river into this power plant. So some of the design issues that come up, and again, why they're using the alternative delivery method of CMAR, is so that they can get a 408 permission. It allows them to advance the design to up to 95% and deal with issues like slope stability, deep soil mixing, offsets, tie-ins, etc. Concurrently, they are processing the project through NEPA to get a 404 permit and a Section 10 permit. And of course, they follow the guidelines set by the legislation that was passed in 1969. However, they did take advantage of some programs. One is the FAST Act, which is an expedite permitting process. It allows for all of the partners to be housed in one dashboard. They also did get a congressional waiver of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And there have been attempts to redefine the essential fish habitat. And we'll get into that. One of the things I think is important to remember that the Oil Pollution Act, which sets the NERDA standards for collateral injury, does not apply to Mid-Breton because right now they're not seeking NERDA funding. However, it is still all BP settlement money, and I believe that the collateral injury standard is something that should be adhered to for the Mid-Breton project. These are all the tools for all the computer modeling nerds that are watching today. They are working off of the Delft 3D basin-wide model. They will do a project level model for Mid-Breton. They are using the Mike suite of tools that are available. These are very complex and very powerful software. They will also use, I know on the Mid-Barataria diversion channel, they're using Flow 3D to look at what's going on within the diversion channel itself. They will use geotech software such as Plaxis that will allow them to answer questions on penetrating the river levee. And they are using physical models. They have a very nice physical model at the CPRA headquarters, and they're doing project level physical modeling for each of the projects at Alden Laboratory. This is just some of the language that was in a letter that was written in July of 2019 regarding the definition of essential fish habitat. And they're looking for it to be modified, as it states at the very bottom, modifying the essential fish habitat language will better allow for the implementation of the Louisiana Coastal Master Plan by reducing a project's legal hurdles. And of course, these two diversions are in the Louisiana Master Plan. And the outfall of these two projects are essential fish habitat for many federally managed species. They did successfully get a waiver for the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and it was put in the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. They first were seeking an administrative route for a waiver, and they got some pushback from NOAA. And so in early 2018, they had this amendment stuck into the budget bill, which allowed them to get the waiver. On the Mid-Breton project, they have been just finishing up their scoping period. They had sessions online throughout July, and they allowed comments to be submitted somewhere around mid-August, August 16th was the deadline. The draft EIS will be out in the fall of 2022. The formal comment period will end in the fall of 2023. The record of decision is scheduled for January of 2024. And below that is the Mid-Barataria schedule. And I suggest that the state of Mississippi and all the stakeholders and all of the engineers that work for the different entities in the state of Mississippi to get engaged in this process. Some of those tenets that we all hold dear to ourselves is they were mostly started after the 1969 NEPA Act was passed by Congress. The Marine Mammal Protection Act being one, the Endangered Species Act, and the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation and Management Act. So these projects all have these guidelines that they have to follow, and the tenets that the state of Mississippi should follow should protect the fisheries, the endangered species, the oysters, oyster reefs, the shrimp, the crabs, the submerged aquatic vegetation, the habitat, also the Mississippi Sound, which has many dolphins, your beaches, your tourism, etc. So I suggest you stay engaged, watch for waivers and amendments to these important conservation acts. Mitigation concepts, they should be brought up right up front. These are some that I had suggested, and it's based on the 150-year-old concept of containment dikes. You can see that there's oyster reefs. That's an essential fish habitat for many federally managed species, including dolphins, trout, redfish, shrimp, crabs. And these containment areas could help control the flow of water from getting into those areas. It could also help accelerate sedimentation processes. Again, the waiver, which I think came to a shock to many people in Mississippi, it basically specifically exempts Mid-Barataria, and a project in the southwest part of Louisiana from having to comply with all of the parts in the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and which basically is the taking of an animal. And the NGOs that endorsed it are part of the Restore the Mississippi Delta, include EDF, the Audubon Society, the National Wildlife Foundation or Federation, and some Louisiana NGOs. So it is important that that you all track this carefully. And I just would like to thank Moby for participating today. If he has any closing remarks, I welcome it. I just leave this image. It came up on my computer, and I thought it was appropriate. I really do believe that the state of Mississippi has to get on board and follow these projects very closely, scrutinize them, and protect the estuaries that are connected between the state of Louisiana and the state of Mississippi, and of course the Mississippi Sound. Moby, you have any closing remarks? We have about 3 minutes, I believe.
Yeah, but I really, really appreciate being a part of this. This is very important for the state of Mississippi. Mississippi has never had a voice in these matters. We have no representation on the commission. We have been a dumping ground for a very long period of time. And I think it is important that we realize that what we have on the Gulf Coast will not exist if this continues. And so the reason why we live on the coast and enjoy the coastal environment, the recreational fisheries, the commercial fisheries, the tourism, is going to suffer. I mean, this last year we had dead zones, we had beaches closed, people not coming to the state. We had over $500 million of economic losses, and it's going to take many years for it to recover. And they opened it up again this year too. So I think it's also that Louisiana has taken some steps unilaterally to go to Congress and get these waivers, which are really contrary to the law. And in addition, they have failed to get the stuff for turtles, and they're the most endangered in the world. And these are things that we should now be careful, because some of this is just going quickly without notice. And so I thank your organization to give us the time to express our views, and we're here to help you to come down and visit us and talk to us. We are here in Mississippi. We work very closely with the College of Veterinary Medicine at Mississippi State University. We're investigating these things. I think we're ramping up stuff. So at the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies, go to our website and check us out. And again, Dennis, you put together a really good presentation.
Thank you, Moby, and we'd be happy to share this presentation if anybody wants a copy of it. Thank you, Jennifer, for inviting us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. If anybody has any questions for Dennis or Moby, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask or put your question in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll read those out as they come in, and Dennis and Moby will answer them.